They found her kneeling beside him in the darkness, his hand clutched in hers, whispering words no one else would ever hear. The staff had scattered. The phones had gone silent. And in that moment, as rain hammered against the windows of a mansion worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, a maid became the only thing standing between a billionaire and death. By morning, everything had changed. The invisible woman had become visible. The untouchable man had been touched. And a love story began that would defy every rule, break every expectation, and force an entire city to confront a question they didn't want to answer. Can love truly exist without status, without wealth, without the armor we build around our hearts? This is not a romance. This is not a fantasy. This is the true story of what happens when two people from opposite worlds collide in the most unexpected way possible. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you believe about love, class, and the price we pay for choosing our own path. Before we dive into this story, I need to know you're really here with me. If you're ready for a story that's going to stay with you long after this video ends, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in New York? California? Somewhere across the ocean? I want to know who's on this journey with me. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere, if you've ever loved someone the world said you shouldn't, this story is for you. Let's begin. Her name was Amara Cole, and she had perfected the art of disappearing. Not literally, of course. But in the way that matters most in the homes of the wealthy. She had learned to move through rooms like a breath of air, present but unnoticed, essential but invisible. Her footsteps made no sound on marble floors. Her hands worked quickly, efficiently, leaving no trace except perfect order. When she passed mirrors, she barely glanced at her own reflection anymore. What was the point? The people she worked for never really looked at her anyway. Amara was 28 years old, though most days she felt both younger and older than that. Younger because she still carried dreams that refused to die, flickering like candles in a storm. Older because she had already lived through losses that aged the soul in ways birthdays never could. She was beautiful in the quiet way that doesn't demand attention. Dark hair usually pulled back in a practical bun. Warm brown eyes that observed everything. A face that could have graced magazine covers if she had been born into different circumstances, but instead spent its days turned downward, focused on tasks, avoiding unnecessary eye contact with the people who employed her. She had grown up in a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business and dreams were something you whispered about, not shouted. Her mother, Rose, had worked as a housekeeper for as long as Amara could remember. Her father, David, had died when Amara was 7, a construction accident that left the family with nothing but bills and memories. Rose had worked 3 jobs to keep their small apartment, to keep food on the table, to keep Amara in school with clean clothes and the illusion of normalcy. Amara remembered her mother's hands. Always moving. Always red and rough from cleaning solutions and hard work. Rose used to say that honest work was dignified work, that there was no shame in serving others if you did it with pride. Amara had believed her then. She believed her still, even on the days when that belief felt like a weight she carried alone. By the time Amara was 16, she was already working alongside her mother on weekends, learning the rhythms of wealthy homes, the unspoken rules that governed the relationship between those who served and those who were served. But Amara had been different from her mother in one crucial way. She was brilliant. Not just smart, but genuinely gifted. Her high school teachers had noticed it immediately. She devoured books, aced every test without seeming to try, and had a particular talent for science. Biology fascinated her. The human body, its intricate systems, the way everything connected and depended on everything else. She dreamed of becoming a doctor. Not for the money or the status, but because she wanted to help people in a way that mattered, in a way that would make her mother proud. Her guidance counselor had helped her apply to colleges, and when the acceptance letter came from Columbia University with a full scholarship, Amara had cried for 3 days straight. Rose had framed the letter and hung it in their tiny living room like it was a Picasso. They had celebrated with cheap champagne and dreams that finally felt within reach. Amara was going to be the first person in her family to graduate from college. She was going to be a doctor. She was going to prove that people like them could rise above their circumstances. Then, 3 weeks before classes were supposed to start, Rose collapsed at work. The diagnosis came quickly and brutally: stage 4 ovarian cancer. Advanced. Aggressive. The doctors gave her maybe 2 years with treatment. Rose had no insurance. The family had no savings. And Amara had a choice to make. She could go to New York, start her new life, chase her dream while her mother underwent chemotherapy alone back home. Or she could stay. It wasn't really a choice at all. Amara deferred her enrollment, citing a family emergency. She told herself it would only be for a semester, maybe 2. She would get her mother through the worst of it, then find a way back to school. She took a job at a nursing home, working night shifts so she could be with Rose during the day. She learned to change 4 bags, to manage pain medication, to hold her mother's hand through the worst moments. She learned what it meant to watch someone you love slowly disappear, their body betraying them cell by cell. Rose fought hard. Harder than anyone expected. She lived not 2 years but 3. 3 years of treatments, of hospital stays, of good days and terrible days, of hope and despair cycling endlessly. And through it all, Amara was there. When Rose finally passed on a cold morning in February, Amara was holding her hand. Rose's last words were an apology. "I'm sorry you had to give up your dreams for me." Amara had shaken her head, tears streaming down her face. "You were my dream, Mom. You were always my dream." After the funeral, after the bills were paid, after the small apartment was emptied and the few belongings sold or donated, Amara tried to go back. She contacted Columbia. But her scholarship was long gone, given to another student. She had no money for tuition. No way to recapture what had been lost. The door that had been opened 3 years ago was now firmly closed. So Amara did what she had always done. She survived. She moved to Manhattan, found work through a domestic staffing agency, and became a maid. Not because she lacked intelligence or ambition, but because the world had made its choice about where she belonged, and she was too tired to fight it anymore. She worked for families in Tribeca, the Upper East Side, Soho. She cleaned penthouses and townhouses, wiped down granite countertops and polished silver that cost more than her monthly rent. She listened to wealthy women complain about their personal trainers while she scrubbed their toilets. She watched spoiled children throw tantrums over toys that cost hundreds of dollars while she sent money back home to pay off her mother's medical debt. She learned to smile politely, to say, "Yes, ma'am," and, of course, "sir," to make herself small and unobtrusive. She learned which families treated their staff with basic human decency and which ones saw them as furniture with hands. She learned to protect her heart, to not get attached, to remember that this was just work, just survival, just the hand she had been dealt. But late at night, alone in her tiny studio apartment in Queens, Amara would sometimes pull out her old biology textbooks. She would run her fingers over the pages, remembering who she had almost been. And she would wonder if her mother had been wrong. Maybe honest work wasn't always dignified. Maybe some dreams, once deferred, could never be reclaimed. Julian Alexander Harrington III was a man who had everything and nothing all at once. At 52 years old, he had built an empire that spanned industries and continents. Harrington Steel and Development was a multinational corporation worth billions, with interests in construction, real estate, manufacturing, and private equity. Julian's name appeared regularly in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. His office was on the 68th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper that bore his family name. His homes, plural, included a penthouse in the city, a mansion in the Hamptons, and a villa in the south of France. He wore suits that cost more than most people's cars. He dined with senators and CEOs. He had power, influence, and wealth beyond most people's imagination. He was also profoundly, devastatingly alone. Julian had grown up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, the son of a steelworker and a nurse. His father, Julian Jr., had been a hard man, shaped by hard times, who believed that strength meant never showing weakness and love meant providing, not coddling. His mother, Claire, had been warmer but exhausted, working double shifts at the hospital, too tired to do much more than make sure her son was fed and clean. Julian had learned early that if he wanted anything in life, he would have to take it himself. He had been smart and ruthless in equal measure. Full scholarship to NYU. MBA from Wharton. First job at an investment bank where he worked 100-hour weeks and learned to see businesses as numbers, problems to be solved, inefficiencies to be eliminated. By 30, he had started his own firm. By 35, he had made his first billion. By 40, he was a fixture in the upper echelons of New York society, despite his humble origins. Or maybe because of them. Americans loved a self-made man, especially one who had clawed his way up from nothing. But success had come with a price. Julian's first marriage, to a woman named Catherine whom he had met in business school, had lasted 5 years before imploding. Catherine had wanted a husband who came home for dinner, who took vacations, who prioritized family over deals. Julian had wanted a partner who understood that empire building required sacrifice. They divorced bitterly, fighting over assets neither of them actually needed. His second marriage, to a prominent socialite named Victoria, had been even shorter. 2 years of attending the right parties, being photographed for the right magazines, and sleeping in separate bedrooms. That divorce had cost him $100 million. His third marriage had been his attempt to get it right. Melissa had been younger, an art gallery owner with a sharp wit and genuine warmth. Julian had actually loved her, or at least he thought he had. But love, it turned out, wasn't enough to bridge the gap between his world and hers. She had wanted children. He had wanted to expand into Asian markets. She had wanted authenticity. He had wanted efficiency. After 3 years, she left him with a note that said simply, "You're not a bad man, Julian. You're just not really here." That had been 4 years ago. Julian hadn't dated seriously since. He had 3 children from his first 2 marriages. Marcus, his eldest at 26, was a corporate attorney who saw his father as an ATM machine with a pulse. Sophia, 23, was an Instagram influencer who called him maybe twice a year, usually when she needed money for some new venture. And Benjamin, 19, was in his second year at Princeton, studying God knows what, sending Julian his grades and little else. Julian loved his children in the abstract way one loves the idea of something. But he didn't really know them, and they didn't really know him. He had been too busy building his empire when they were young, too absent during the years that mattered. Now they were strangers who shared his DNA and resented his existence. Julian's father had died of a heart attack when Julian was 45, collapsing on a job site he had no business being on at 72 years old, too proud to fully retire. His mother had followed 2 years later, a stroke that took her in her sleep. Julian had cried at both funerals, genuine tears that surprised him with their intensity. But mostly he had felt numb. His parents had worked their entire lives and died with little to show for it except a son who had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams but somehow still felt like a failure. The irony wasn't lost on Julian. He had everything his parents never had. Security. Comfort. Options. And yet he felt more trapped than they ever seemed. His days were filled with meetings, negotiations, decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. His evenings were filled with charity galas, business dinners, networking events where everyone wanted something from him. His nights were filled with insomnia and bourbon, staring at spreadsheets on his laptop at 3 in the morning because sleep felt like time wasted. His estate in Westchester County, where he spent most of his time, was a monument to his success and his loneliness. 14,000 square feet of limestone and glass, sitting on 12 acres of manicured grounds. Indoor pool, home theater, wine cellar, gym, library. Staff quarters for the live-in help. A 4-car garage housing vehicles he rarely drove. Julian wandered through those rooms like a ghost haunting his own life. Everything was perfect and sterile and empty. His bedroom was the size of most people's apartments. His bed was custom-made, imported from Italy, with sheets that cost $2,000. He slept on one side, same side every night, the other side untouched, a constant reminder of his solitude. He employed a full household staff. Patricia Marsh, his estate manager, a severe woman in her 50s who ran his home with military precision. Marcus the butler, not to be confused with his son, an older gentleman who had worked for Julian for over a decade. 2 chefs who alternated shifts. A rotating team of housekeepers who came through an agency. Gardeners. A driver. Security personnel. All of them excellent at their jobs. All of them treating him with professional deference that felt more like distance. Julian could be surrounded by 10 people and still feel completely alone. His friends, if he could call them that, were other wealthy men. They played golf together, attended the same benefits, invested in each other's ventures. But their conversations rarely went beyond business, markets, politics from a safely removed distance. None of them would call him at 2 in the morning just to talk. None of them really cared if he lived or died, except in how it might affect their portfolios. Julian knew this. Accepted it. Had stopped expecting anything different years ago. He had tried therapy once, at Melissa's insistence. The therapist, a kind woman with an office in the village, had asked him what he wanted out of life. Julian had answered honestly, he didn't know anymore. She had suggested he was suffering from depression, possibly anxiety. She prescribed medication and recommended twice-weekly sessions. Julian had taken the pills for a month, felt nothing different, and stopped. He never went back. He told himself he didn't have time for therapy. The truth was he didn't believe anything could help. There were moments, though. Moments when the mask slipped and Julian felt the full weight of his isolation. Sometimes he would be in a meeting, surrounded by executives hanging on his every word, and suddenly feel like he was watching the scene from outside his own body, wondering who that man in the expensive suit was and why everyone was pretending he mattered. Sometimes he would see a couple at a restaurant, just an ordinary couple, holding hands across the table and laughing about something mundane, and feel a pang of envy so intense it shocked him. Sometimes he would wake up on a Sunday morning in his enormous, silent house and think about how easy it would be to just not get up, to just stay in bed until someone noticed he was gone. But someone always needed him for something. Some decision. Some signature. Some crisis only he could solve. So he got up. The photograph Amara would later find in his study was taken at the Queen's County Fair when Julian was 8 years old. His mother had won it at a raffle. It was one of the few times Julian remembered his father smiling, his mother laughing, all of them eating cotton candy and riding the Ferris wheel. That day felt like it belonged to someone else's life, some parallel universe where the Harringtons had stayed working class and happy. Julian kept the photo hidden because looking at it hurt too much. It reminded him of a version of himself that still believed joy was possible. By the time he was 52, Julian had come to a quiet conclusion that he shared with no one: he was going to die alone. Not immediately, probably not for another 20 or 30 years if his health held. But when that day came, he would die in a hospital room surrounded by lawyers and executives, not family. Not anyone who loved him. The business would continue. His children would fight over his estate. And within a year, the world would forget Julian Harrington had ever existed beyond his name on a few buildings. This thought didn't make him sad anymore. It just made him tired. So tired. Amara was hired through the agency on a Tuesday in late March. The call came from Patricia Marsh, who had a reputation among the domestic workers as demanding but fair. The Harrington estate needed additional housekeeping staff for deep spring cleaning, and possibly a permanent position if the fit was right. The pay was excellent, well above market rate. The hours were standard. The expectations were high. Amara took the job without hesitation. She needed the money. Her own rent was increasing, and she was still paying down the last of her mother's medical debt, a seemingly endless hole that swallowed every extra dollar she managed to save. She arrived at the estate on a Thursday morning, taking the train to Westchester and then a bus, a commute that took nearly 2 hours. Her first sight of the property took her breath away. The iron gates, the long driveway lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, the mansion itself rising like something out of a movie. Amara had worked in wealthy homes before, but this was different. This was wealth on a scale that felt almost abstract, divorced from any recognizable reality. Patricia met her at the service entrance, assessed her with shrewd eyes, and led her inside. The interior was even more impressive. High ceilings, original artwork on the walls, furniture that looked like it belonged in museums. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect. Everything felt cold. Patricia laid out the rules clearly. Arrive by 7 in the morning. Clean the designated rooms according to a specific schedule. Use only approved cleaning products in the precise manner outlined. Do not touch personal items beyond what was necessary for cleaning. Do not speak to Mr. Harrington unless spoken to first. Do not ask questions about his life or business. Do not gossip with other staff members. Maintain absolute professionalism at all times. Amara listened, nodded, and signed the employment agreement without reading it too carefully. She had signed dozens of these. They all said the same thing: you are invisible, remember your place, do your job, and stay out of the way. For the first 3 weeks, Amara barely saw Julian Harrington. She caught glimpses of him occasionally, a tall figure in an expensive suit heading out the front door early in the morning, or moving through the hallway late at night, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and tense. He never looked at her directly. She might as well have been part of the furniture. This didn't bother Amara. She preferred it, actually. The less attention she attracted, the easier her job became. But she noticed things about him anyway. She couldn't help it. It was part of who she was, this habit of observation she had developed over years of moving through other people's spaces. She noticed that his bedroom, which she cleaned 3 times a week, was immaculate in a way that suggested no one really lived there. The bed was made perfectly every morning before she arrived, hospital corners so precise they had to be his own work. His closet was organized by color and type, suits arranged with mathematical precision. His bathroom showed signs of use but no real mess, towels hung carefully, products lined up with labels facing out. It was the room of someone who controlled everything, even in his most private moments. She noticed that his home office, which she was allowed to dust and vacuum but not touch beyond that, was full of papers and files but no personal photographs except the one hidden in the drawer. She had found it accidentally her second week, reaching for a pen that had rolled under the desk. The photo of young Julian and his mother at the fair had stopped her cold. Not because it was particularly remarkable, but because of the expression on the boy's face. Pure, uncomplicated joy. She had never seen that expression on the adult version of the man. She had carefully placed the photo back exactly where she found it and never mentioned it. But she thought about it. She noticed that the kitchen, with its professional-grade appliances and granite countertops, seemed barely used. The chefs prepared elaborate meals, and most of them came back to the kitchen barely touched. Patricia would sigh and direct the staff to package up the food for donation. Such waste, she would mutter, though never loud enough for Mr. Harrington to hear. Amara noticed that late at night, usually around 11 or midnight, Julian would go to his library. She knew this because she often worked late, preferring to do the more detailed cleaning when the house was quiet and she wouldn't be in anyone's way. She would hear his footsteps, the sound of the library door opening and closing. Sometimes she would hear music, classical usually, playing softly. Once, she had walked past the library door and heard something that made her pause, a sound that might have been crying, or might have been just exhausted breathing. She had stood there for a long moment, hand raised to knock, to ask if everything was all right. But then she remembered the rules. Do not speak unless spoken to. So she had walked away, feeling guilty for reasons she couldn't quite articulate. She noticed that he took medication. Multiple prescriptions, sitting in his bathroom cabinet, visible when she restocked supplies. Sleeping pills. Anti-anxiety medication. Blood pressure medication. The bottles were mostly full, suggesting he didn't take them regularly. She wondered if he should. She noticed that his trash cans told a story. Empty bourbon bottles with increasing frequency. Take-out containers from late-night meals eaten alone at his desk. Crumpled papers with handwritten notes that looked like they had been started and abandoned. Once, she found a greeting card in his office trash, still in its envelope. Birthday card for his daughter, unsigned, never sent. Amara had felt an ache in her chest looking at it. The other staff members had mixed feelings about Julian Harrington. Patricia respected him for his fairness and consistency. Marcus the butler found him distant but professional. The chefs appreciated that he never complained about their cooking, even though he rarely ate more than a few bites. The other housekeepers mostly found him intimidating, his silence and intensity making them nervous. One of them, a woman named Gloria who had worked at the estate longer than anyone, told Amara during lunch one day, "Mr. Harrington is a good man, I think. But he's so lonely it hurts to look at him. He doesn't know how to connect with people anymore, if he ever did. He's built this beautiful prison and locked himself inside." Amara didn't share her own observations. She had learned that in houses like this, neutrality was survival. But Gloria's words stayed with her because they resonated with something she had already sensed. Julian Harrington was drowning in his own success, surrounded by everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. She recognized that kind of loneliness. She had felt it herself, in different circumstances but with the same hollow ache. The loneliness of being functionally alone even when surrounded by people. The loneliness of living a life that looked fine from the outside but felt empty from the inside. Then came the night of April 22nd. Amara had stayed late, as she often did on Thursdays, to clean the library and Julian's study. Patricia had already gone home. Most of the staff had finished for the day. The estate was quiet except for the distant sound of the two security guards making their rounds outside. Amara was in the library, carefully dusting the hundreds of books that lined the shelves, when she heard it. A crash. Loud and sudden, coming from somewhere nearby. Then silence. She froze, duster in hand, listening. Nothing. Maybe something had fallen over in another room. The house was old, sometimes things shifted. But something about the silence felt wrong. Amara set down her duster and walked into the hallway, moving toward Julian's study. The door was ajar. "Mr. Harrington," she called softly. No answer. She pushed the door open. Julian was on the floor beside his desk, collapsed on his side, his face pale and slick with sweat. His eyes were half open but unfocused. His breathing was rapid and shallow. A glass of bourbon had shattered on the floor beside him, liquid spreading across the hardwood. For one terrible second, Amara's mind went blank with panic. Then her training kicked in. The years she had spent caring for her mother, the medical knowledge she had accumulated during that time, all of it flooded back. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands moving to check his pulse. It was racing, irregular. His skin was cold. "Mr. Harrington, can you hear me?" she said, her voice calm despite the terror coursing through her. "Julian, can you hear me?" His eyes moved toward her voice but didn't quite focus. He tried to speak, but only a rasping sound came out. Amara pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands and dialed 911. She gave the address, explained the situation, answered the dispatcher's questions with a clarity that surprised even her. Yes, he was breathing. Yes, he had a pulse. No, she didn't know if he had taken anything or if he had a history of heart problems. Yes, someone would meet the ambulance at the gate. While she waited, while the dispatcher stayed on the line, Amara did something that wasn't medically necessary but felt absolutely essential. She took Julian's hand. It was cold, trembling slightly. She held it firmly in both of hers and started talking to him. Stay with me, okay? Help is coming. You're going to be fine. Just stay with me. She told him her name. Told him she was going to make sure he was okay. Told him to keep breathing, to stay conscious, to hold on. His fingers, barely perceptible, curled around hers. His eyes, still unfocused, turned toward her face. And in that moment, Julian Harrington heard something he hadn't heard in longer than he could remember. He heard genuine care in someone's voice. Not professional concern. Not polite interest. But real, human care. Someone was worried about him not because of what he represented but because he was a person in pain. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, though it felt like an hour. They loaded Julian onto a stretcher, checked his vitals, asked rapid-fire questions that Amara answered as best she could. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, told Amara she had probably saved his life by calling so quickly. Amara didn't feel heroic. She felt terrified. As they wheeled Julian toward the ambulance, she heard him say something, his voice weak. The paramedic closest to him leaned down. What did he say? Amara asked. The paramedic looked at her strangely. He said, "Don't leave. I think he means you." Amara didn't think. She just moved. She told one of the security guards to call Patricia and explain what happened. Then she climbed into the ambulance, still wearing her cleaning uniform, her hands still shaking, and rode to the hospital holding a billionaire's hand while he drifted in and out of consciousness. At the hospital, chaos. Doctors, nurses, forms, questions. Julian was taken immediately to the emergency room. Amara waited in a plastic chair in the hallway, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She didn't know why she had come. This wasn't her job. This wasn't her responsibility. She should call the agency, explain what happened, probably go home. But something kept her in that chair. 2 hours later, a doctor came out. Middle-aged man, tired eyes, scrubs that had seen a long shift. "Are you family?" he asked. "No," Amara said. "I work for him. I'm the one who found him." The doctor nodded. He had a severe panic attack combined with acute exhaustion and dehydration. His body basically shut down from stress. "We've stabilized him, but he needs rest and he needs to make some serious lifestyle changes. Does he have family we should contact?" Amara realized she didn't know. She had Julian's cell phone, which the paramedics had grabbed. She explained this to the doctor, who looked at her with something like sympathy. "He keeps asking for you. Says your name." "Amara. That's you?" "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He can have visitors for a few minutes. Room 212. Amara walked down the hallway on legs that felt disconnected from her body. She found the room. Pushed open the door. Julian was in the bed, connected to N4, monitors beeping softly. His eyes were closed. She almost left, not wanting to disturb him. Then his eyes opened, found hers immediately. "You stayed," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "Of course," Amara said, not knowing what else to say. She walked to the bedside, stood there awkwardly. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. And something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them had words for. Recognition, maybe. Two lonely people seeing each other across an unbridgeable distance that suddenly didn't feel quite so unbridgeable anymore. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. And let me ask you something. Have you ever been invisible to someone? Have you ever felt like you didn't matter, like you could disappear and no one would notice? Or maybe you've been on the other side. Maybe you've been so focused on your own life, your own struggles, that you didn't see the people right in front of you who cared. Think about that while we continue, because this story is about to take a turn that neither Amara nor Julian saw coming. Julian was released from the hospital the next afternoon with strict orders: rest, reduce stress, see a therapist, and stop treating his body like it was indestructible. The doctor had been blunt. Mr. Harrington, you're 52 years old with the blood pressure of someone 70 and the stress levels of someone running from a war zone. Your body gave you a warning last night. Next time might be a heart attack. You need to change, or you're not going to see 60. Julian had nodded, thanked the doctor, and immediately thought about the 3 meetings he had scheduled for next week that he couldn't possibly miss. But something was different. That moment on the floor of his study, the feeling of his body betraying him, the absolute terror of losing control. And then, the voice. Amara's voice, steady and calm, telling him to stay, to hold on, that he wasn't alone. He remembered her hand holding his. The ambulance ride was mostly a blur, but he remembered that. Patricia picked him up from the hospital, her face tight with concern. On the drive back to the estate, she informed him that Amara Cole, one of the housekeepers, had been the one who found him and called for help. She had ridden in the ambulance and waited at the hospital until he was stable. She exceeded her duties significantly, Patricia said, in her usual clipped manner. I've made note of it in her file. Julian nodded, but he was thinking something else entirely. She stayed. When his children probably didn't even know he had been hospitalized, when his ex-wives certainly wouldn't care, when his business partners and friends would send flowers and cards but wouldn't lose sleep over him, a woman he barely knew had held his hand in the darkness and refused to leave. When they arrived at the estate, Julian went straight to his bedroom, against Patricia's suggestion that he rest in the main sitting room where she could keep an eye on him. He needed to be alone, to process what had happened. He slept for 14 hours straight, a deep, dreamless sleep that his body had been craving for months. When he woke, it was morning again, sunlight streaming through the windows. He felt weak but clear-headed. And he felt something else. Curious. He wanted to know more about the woman who had saved him. Patricia was professional about it when he asked. She provided Amara's employment file. Age 28. From upstate New York. Employed through the agency for 3 years with excellent references. Previous positions with families in Manhattan. Reliable, quiet, thorough. No complaints. No drama. The file told him nothing that mattered. That afternoon, Julian did something unprecedented. He asked Patricia to summon Amara to his private sitting room. Patricia raised an eyebrow but complied. 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock on the door. Come in, Julian said. The door opened, and Amara entered, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. She was in her uniform, her hair pulled back, her eyes avoiding direct contact with his. She looked different than he remembered from the hospital. Smaller, somehow. More vulnerable. Julian realized he had probably never really looked at her before that night. Please, sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I won't keep you long. I know you have work. Amara sat, perched on the edge of the chair like she might need to run at any moment. Mr. Harrington, I'm glad you're feeling better, she said quietly. I hope I didn't overstep by going to the hospital. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. Overstep? Julian said, and found himself almost laughing, though it came out as more of a cough. Amara, you saved my life. The doctor said if I had been alone much longer, if no one had found me, it could have been much worse. You didn't overstep. You went above and beyond, and I want to thank you. Properly. He reached for an envelope on the side table, held it out to her. This is a bonus. It's not enough, but it's something. Amara didn't take the envelope. She just looked at it, then at him. I don't want money, Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice soft but firm. I didn't do it for money. I did it because you needed help. Julian was stunned. In his world, everything was transactional. Everything had a price. The idea that someone would refuse compensation for saving his life was so foreign he didn't know how to respond. Then what can I do? He asked. How can I repay you? Amara met his eyes for the first time. You can take care of yourself, she said. The doctor said you need to rest and reduce stress. So do that. That's all I want. Julian felt something crack open in his chest, some hard shell he hadn't even known was there. This woman, who cleaned his house for barely above minimum wage, who had every reason to take the money and run, was sitting in front of him telling him that his health mattered. Not his wealth. Not his influence. Just him. Why did you stay? He asked, the question coming out before he could stop it. At the hospital. You could have just called for help and left. Why did you stay? Amara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured. Because no one should be alone when they're scared. I know what that feels like. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. That conversation was supposed to be the end of it. A thank you, an acknowledgement, and then life returning to normal. But Julian found he couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, as he reluctantly followed doctor's orders and worked from home, he became aware of Amara in a way he hadn't been before. He noticed when she came and went. He noticed the quiet efficiency of her work. He noticed that she moved through the house like water, adapting to whatever space she occupied without disturbing it. And he noticed something else. She was observant in a way that went beyond professional. Small things. She had noticed that he liked his coffee a certain way and had mentioned it to the kitchen staff. She had noticed that the photograph of him and his mother had been knocked slightly askew during the medical emergency and had carefully straightened it. She had noticed that he worked late most nights and had started leaving a glass of water on his desk before she left for the day. These tiny gestures, probably meaningless to her, meant everything to Julian. They suggested that someone was actually paying attention to him as a person, not as an employer or a business opportunity. One evening, about a week after the incident, Julian was in his library, supposedly reading but actually just staring at the same page for 20 minutes, when there was a soft knock. Come in, he called, expecting Patricia with some household matter. But it was Amara, holding a stack of freshly laundered towels. I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Harrington. I just need to restock the powder room. Of course, Julian said. And please, you don't have to apologize. This is your workplace. Amara nodded and moved toward the small bathroom adjacent to the library. Julian watched her, then made a decision. Amara, can I ask you something? She paused in the doorway, turned back. Of course. That night, when you found me, you called me Julian. Not Mr. Harrington. I noticed. Amara's face colored slightly. I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't thinking. It won't happen again. No, Julian said quickly. I'm not upset. Actually, I was wondering if you might continue to call me that. When we're speaking privately, I mean. No one calls me by my first name anymore. Everyone is so formal. It would be nice to hear it again. Amara looked uncertain. I don't think that would be appropriate, Mr. Harrington. You're my employer. There are boundaries. Boundaries that say you can save my life but not use my given name. Julian said, and there was a hint of humor in his voice, rusty from disuse. Amara smiled despite herself. It was a small smile, but it transformed her face, made her look younger and lighter. When you put it that way, it does seem a bit silly. So you'll consider it? Julian pressed. I'll consider it, Amara said. She finished her task and left, and Julian sat in his chair feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. The hope that there might be another conversation, another small moment of genuine connection. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the Harrington household. Julian began working from home more often, citing his health, which wasn't entirely untrue. But the real reason was that he found himself looking forward to the days Amara worked. He started timing his breaks from conference calls to coincide with when she might be in certain parts of the house. Not in a creepy way, he told himself. He wasn't following her around. He was just making himself more available for conversation. And they did talk. Small conversations at first. Julian asking how her day was going. Amara politely answering, then asking about his work in return. He found himself actually telling her things, simplified versions of what he did, and she listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that showed she was really paying attention. One afternoon, Julian found her in the library, carefully cleaning the spines of books on the upper shelves. He noticed she was looking at the titles with interest. "Are you a reader?" he asked. Amara startled slightly, not having heard him come in. "Oh, yes," she said. "I love to read. I don't have as much time for it as I'd like, but when I can, I do." "What do you like?" Julian asked, genuinely curious. "Everything, really," Amara said, climbing down the ladder. "Fiction, non-fiction, history, science. I'm not picky. I just like learning, like being transported somewhere else for a while." "Science?" Julian said, surprised. "That's not what I would have expected." Amara's expression shuddered slightly, and Julian realized he had said something wrong. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "That came out wrong. I just meant that most people say they read for escape, and science isn't usually what they mean." Amara relaxed a bit. "I find science comforting," she said. "The idea that there are rules, that things can be understood if you study them enough. The world makes more sense when you understand how it works." "That's beautiful," Julian said, and meant it. "I wish more people thought that way." They talked for almost an hour that afternoon, standing in the library surrounded by books, about everything from biology to business, from New York City to small-town life. Julian learned that Amara had grown up in upstate New York, that she had lost her father young, that she loved old movies and hated coffee but loved tea. He told her about growing up in Queens, about his parents and their work ethic, about the pressure he felt to prove he was worthy of his success. And when Patricia came looking for him to inform him of an urgent call, Julian realized he hadn't thought about work once in the past hour. He had been completely present, completely engaged, in a way he couldn't remember being in years. After that, the conversations became more frequent. Julian would find excuses to be in whatever room Amara was cleaning. He would offer her coffee, which she would decline, then tea, which she would accept. They would talk while she worked, her hands busy but her mind fully engaged with whatever topic they were discussing. Julian found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. His fear that he had wasted his life chasing the wrong things. His regret over his relationships with his children. His loneliness. And Amara, slowly, began to share too. She told him about her mother's illness, though not about giving up Columbia. That felt too personal, too raw. She told him about the strange isolation of working in wealthy homes, being surrounded by beautiful things that would never be hers, invisible to the people whose lives she maintained. She told him about the dignity her mother had taught her, the belief that all work mattered if you did it well. Julian found himself moved by her stories, impressed by her resilience, drawn to her in a way that was entirely new to him. This wasn't physical attraction, though he was beginning to realize she was beautiful. This was something deeper. This was being seen and seeing someone else in return. Patricia noticed the change and didn't approve. She pulled Julian aside one evening after Amara had left for the day. "Mr. Harrington, if I may speak frankly." "You always do, Patricia," Julian said. I'm concerned about your increased interaction with Ms. Cole. She's an excellent employee, but there are boundaries that should be maintained. For both your protection and hers. We're just talking, Julian said. There's nothing inappropriate happening. Perhaps not yet, Patricia said carefully. But people will talk, sir. The other staff members have already noticed. And Ms. Cole's position here could become very uncomfortable if there's any suggestion of impropriety. Julian wanted to argue, but he knew Patricia was right. The power dynamic was completely unbalanced. Amara worked for him. She depended on this job. Any relationship between them, even friendship, would be scrutinized and judged. He backed off for a few days, staying in his office, avoiding the parts of the house where Amara worked. But it felt like withdrawal, like deliberately depriving himself of something vital. He realized, with a start, that Amara had become the best part of his days. That talking with her made him feel more alive than closing a billion-dollar deal. That was terrifying. And exhilarating. And completely impossible. Then came a Saturday in late May. Julian had gone into his study to review some contracts and found Amara there, not cleaning but standing in front of the bookshelf, reading. She was so absorbed she didn't hear him come in. Julian cleared his throat gently. Amara jumped, the book nearly falling from her hands. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrington," she said, her face flushing. "I shouldn't be reading on the job. I just saw this book and I couldn't help myself. It won't happen again." She moved to put the book back, but Julian stopped her. "What are you reading?" Amara held up the book. "It's about cellular biology. I know it's probably silly for someone like me to be interested in this, but—" "Someone like you?" Julian interrupted. "What does that mean?" "I just mean, I'm a housekeeper, not a scientist. This isn't really my world." "Why not?" Julian asked, genuinely confused. "You're clearly intelligent. You understand what you're reading. Why couldn't this be your world?" And there it was. The question that unlocked everything. Amara's carefully maintained composure crumbled. Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned away, trying to hide them. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice thick. "I should go. I'm not usually this emotional at work." "Amara, wait," Julian said. "Please. I didn't mean to upset you. Talk to me. What's wrong?" And Amara, standing in that beautiful study with the book still in her hands, made a decision. She was tired of hiding. Tired of pretending she was okay with a life that felt like wearing someone else's clothes. She turned back to Julian, tears streaming down her face, and told him everything. About Columbia. About the scholarship. About her mother's diagnosis and the choice that wasn't really a choice. About the 3 years of watching someone die slowly, of sacrificing her dreams to provide comfort in someone else's final days. About trying to go back and finding the door closed. About accepting that she would spend her life cleaning other people's houses because the world had decided that was all she was worth. "I gave it all up," she said, her voice breaking. "And I don't regret it. I couldn't let my mother die alone, but sometimes I look at books like this and I remember who I was supposed to be, and it hurts so much I can barely breathe." Julian stood frozen, the weight of her words crushing something in his chest. Here was a woman who had given up everything for love, who had sacrificed her own future to care for someone else, who had been forced by circumstances to become less than she was capable of being. And she had done it with grace and dignity and without complaint. Until now. Until he had asked the right question. "I'm so sorry," Julian said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry that happened to you. That you had to make that choice. That the world let you fall through the cracks." "It's not your fault," Amara said, wiping her eyes. "That's just life. Some people get opportunities and some people don't. I shouldn't complain. I have a job. I have health. I have more than a lot of people. Don't do that, Julian said. Don't minimize what you lost. You were going to be a doctor. You were going to save lives. That matters. Your dreams matter. The fact that you had to give them up isn't something to just accept. It's a tragedy. Amara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his face that shocked her. He was crying. This billionaire, this powerful man who commanded empires and made decisions that affected thousands of lives, was standing in his study with tears running down his face, crying for her. For a loss that wasn't his own. For a life that could have been. Why do you care? She whispered. I'm no one. I'm just your housekeeper. You're not no one to me, Julian said. You're the person who stayed when I needed help. You're the person who makes me laugh. You're the person who makes me feel less alone. You're Amara. And that matters. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. Then Amara did something that surprised both of them. She closed the distance between them and hugged him. Just wrapped her arms around him and held on, her face pressed against his shoulder, her body shaking with sobs she had held in for years. Julian froze for a second, then his arms came up around her, holding her while she cried, while years of grief and loss and frustrated dreams poured out. They stood like that for a long time, two lonely people finding comfort in each other, the boundaries of employer and employee dissolving in the face of genuine human need. When Amara finally pulled back, she was embarrassed. I'm so sorry, she said, avoiding his eyes. That was completely inappropriate. I should go. Amara, wait, Julian said. Please don't go. Not like this. Let me make you some tea. Let's sit and talk. Please. And because she was exhausted from crying, because she couldn't face the long commute home yet, because some part of her wanted to stay, Amara nodded. They went to the kitchen, empty this late in the day, and Julian made tea while Amara sat at the counter, feeling raw and exposed and strangely lighter than she had in years. They talked until the sun went down, until the security lights came on outside, until Patricia came in looking for Julian and stopped short at the sight of them sitting together like old friends. That night marked a turning point. After that, they stopped pretending. They were friends. Genuine friends, despite the impossible circumstances. Julian started loaning Amara books from his library. She would read them at home and they would discuss them the next time she worked. He discovered she had opinions on everything and a sharp analytical mind that had been wasted on menial labor. She discovered that underneath his intimidating exterior was a lonely man who had forgotten how to connect with people and was desperate to remember. They talked about everything. Politics, art, philosophy, their childhoods, their fears, their regrets. Julian told her about his children, his failed marriages, his sense that he had built a life that looked successful from the outside but felt hollow from the inside. Amara told him about her dreams of helping people, her love of science, her fear that she had become so comfortable with survival that she had forgotten how to actually live. They challenged each other. Amara would call Julian out when he was being self-pitying or when he fell into the trap of thinking money could solve problems it couldn't. Julian would encourage Amara to think bigger, to not accept limitations that had been imposed on her by circumstances rather than by her own abilities. And slowly, carefully, they began to matter to each other in ways that went beyond friendship. Julian found himself thinking about Amara constantly. Wondering what she was doing on her days off. Looking forward to Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday, the days she worked. Feeling disappointed when she couldn't make it because of a dentist appointment or a cold. He started leaving notes for her, casual things, nothing inappropriate. Thank you for noticing I needed more notebooks in my study. Finished that book you recommended. You were right. Brilliant. Hope you have a good weekend. Amara found herself doing the same. Leaving his favorite tea in his office. Putting a bookmark in a book he might enjoy. Writing small notes in return. That meeting sounded stressful. Hope it went okay. Happy Friday. Don't forget to eat lunch. The other staff noticed. Of course they did. Patricia's lips grew thinner. The other housekeepers whispered. Marcus the butler raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Gloria, the longtime housekeeper, pulled Amara aside one day. Be careful, honey, she said, her voice kind but firm. I know you're just being friendly, and I know Mr. Harrington is a good man. But this can't end well. You're from different worlds. And people like us, we don't get fairy tale endings with people like him. We just get hurt. We're just friends, Amara protested. Are you? Gloria asked. Or are you falling for him? Amara opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Because she was falling. Or maybe she had already fallen and was just now admitting it to herself. She was in love with Julian Harrington. With his intelligence, his humor, his vulnerability, the way he actually listened when she talked, the way he saw her as a person rather than as help. It was the stupidest, most impossible thing she could have done. And there was no way to undo it. Julian was having the same realization around the same time. He was in a board meeting, supposedly paying attention to a presentation about third-quarter projections, when he realized he was thinking about Amara. About the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking. About the sound of her laugh, rare but genuine. About how much he wanted to see her happy, to be the one who made her happy. About how empty his life felt on the days he didn't see her. He was in love with her. Completely, utterly, impossibly in love with his housekeeper. The woman who worked for him. The woman who depended on him for her income. The woman who had every reason to feel pressured or coerced if he told her how he felt. It was unethical. It was inappropriate. It was probably the first real thing he had felt in decades. What the hell was he supposed to do? For weeks, they both tried to pretend nothing had changed. They still talked, still shared books and ideas, still looked forward to seeing each other. But there was a new tension now, an awareness that hummed beneath every interaction. Julian caught himself staring at her more often. Amara found excuses to linger in rooms he occupied. They were careful never to touch, but the space between them felt charged, electric. Then came the night in early July when everything came to a head. The estate was hosting a small dinner party, a business obligation that Julian couldn't avoid. Amara had volunteered to stay late to help with the event, along with the rest of the household staff. She moved through the evening serving appetizers, refilling glasses, clearing plates, invisible to the guests who barely glanced at her. But Julian noticed her. He watched her move through the room with practiced grace, watched the way she politely avoided eye contact with the guests, watched the way she seemed to shrink herself to take up as little space as possible. And something in him broke. These people, his colleagues and business partners, were drinking wine that cost more per bottle than Amara made in a week. They were talking about summer homes and investment strategies while the woman he loved served them food she couldn't afford to buy for herself. The injustice of it was suddenly unbearable. After the guests left, after the other staff had cleaned up and gone home, Julian went looking for Amara. He found her in the kitchen, wiping down the counters one final time before leaving. She looked exhausted. You should go home, Julian said from the doorway. Get some rest. Amara turned, smiled tiredly. Just finishing up. It was a successful evening. Your guests seemed pleased. I don't care about them, Julian said, more harshly than he intended. I'm sorry you had to work so late. It's my job, Amara said, confused by his tone. Is everything okay? No, Julian said. Nothing's okay. Amara, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Can you do that? Amara's heart started pounding. She nodded, suddenly afraid of what was coming. Julian took a breath. I know this is completely inappropriate. I know I'm your employer and you're my employee and there's a power dynamic that makes this wrong. I know that if I say this, I might lose the best friend I've ever had. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I'm in love with you, Amara. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Amara stared at him, her expression unreadable. Julian continued, words spilling out now that he had started. I know you probably think I'm crazy. Or that I'm trying to take advantage of you. But I swear I'm not. These feelings, they're real. You make me feel like a human being again. You make me want to be better. You make me happy in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. And I needed you to know that, even if it ruins everything between us. I needed you to know that you matter. That you're extraordinary. That you deserve so much more than what life has given you. Julian, Amara said, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not expecting you to feel the same way. I know that wouldn't make sense. I'm 24 years older than you. I'm your boss. I'm divorced 3 times with children who hate me. I'm emotionally damaged and I work too much and I have no idea how to be in a healthy relationship. You'd be insane to want anything to do with me. But I needed you to know. Because every day I don't tell you feels like lying. And you deserve the truth. Amara's hands were shaking. She set down the cloth she was holding before she dropped it. Can I speak now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian nodded, bracing himself for rejection. You think I'd be insane to want anything to do with you? Amara said. Julian, I've been in love with you for months. Since before I even understood what was happening. Since you asked me to call you by your first name. Since you cried when I told you about my mother. Since you made me feel like I mattered for the first time in years. Julian felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. What? I love you, Amara said, and started crying. I love you and it's the stupidest thing I've ever done because you're right, this is impossible. You're a billionaire and I clean houses. You have dinner parties with senators and I serve the food. We live in completely different worlds and there's no version of reality where this works out. But you love me, Julian said, his voice filled with wonder. Despite all of that, you love me. Yes, Amara said. God help me, yes. Julian crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and cupped her face in his hands. Then that's all that matters, he said. Everything else, we'll figure out. But if you love me and I love you, then we have something real. Something worth fighting for. Julian, it's not that simple, Amara said. Your children will hate this. Your business associates will judge you. The staff already whispers about us. And people will say terrible things about me. They'll say I'm a gold digger, that I manipulated you, that I slept my way into your life. They'll never see me as your equal. I don't care what they think, Julian said fiercely. I've spent my entire life caring what people think, trying to prove myself, trying to be worthy. And it's made me miserable. You're the first person who sees me, really sees me, and doesn't want anything except for me to be happy. That's worth more than all the money in the world. But I don't want you to lose everything because of me, Amara said. Your reputation, your business relationships, your family. I don't want to be the reason you become isolated. Amara, I'm already isolated, Julian said. I've been alone for years, surrounded by people who don't actually care about me. Being with you wouldn't isolate me. It would save me. They stood there in the kitchen, Julian's hands still framing Amara's face, both of them trembling with the weight of what they were admitting. This is crazy, Amara whispered. Completely crazy, Julian agreed. Are we really doing this? Amara asked. I don't know, Julian said honestly. But I know I don't want to lose you. I know I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. And I know that if we do this, it won't be easy. But maybe it will be worth it. Amara closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was a mistake. That she should walk away, find another job, protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. But her heart, her stupid, hopeful heart, was saying something else entirely. It was saying yes. It was saying finally. It was saying this is what you've been waiting for your entire life. We can't rush this, she said, opening her eyes. We need to be smart. Figure out how to navigate this without destroying everything. Agreed, Julian said. We'll take it slow. Keep it private for now, until we're sure this is real. And you need to talk to your children, Amara said. Before they hear it from someone else. They deserve that. Julian nodded, though the thought of that conversation filled him with dread. And I need to quit, Amara said. What? No. Julian, I can't work for you and date you. That's not appropriate. I need to find another job, establish some independence. Otherwise, people will always see me as your employee who seduced you for money. Julian understood, even though he hated it. Okay. But let me help you find something. Not because I think you can't do it yourself, but because I have connections and I want to use them to make your life easier. Amara hesitated, then nodded. This was going to be hard. Accepting help. Allowing herself to be vulnerable. Trusting that Julian's feelings were real and wouldn't evaporate when the novelty wore off. They started dating in secret. It was strange and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Julian would pick Amara up from her apartment in Queens, and they would drive out to small restaurants in Connecticut or New Jersey, places where they were unlikely to run into anyone who knew him. They would talk for hours over dinner, holding hands across the table like teenagers. They would take walks on quiet beaches, Julian wearing a baseball cap pulled low, both of them hyper-aware of their surroundings. For the first time in his adult life, Julian felt like he was actually living instead of just existing. Everything seemed brighter, more vivid. Food tasted better. Music sounded richer. The world, which had seemed so gray and oppressive, was suddenly full of color. Amara felt the same way. After years of just surviving, of going through the motions, she felt awake again. Julian made her laugh. He challenged her intellectually. He listened to her dreams, and more importantly, he believed in them. One evening, about a month into their secret relationship, Julian picked her up and drove her not to a restaurant but to Columbia University. What are we doing here? Amara asked, her heart starting to pound. I made some calls, Julian said. Talked to some people. Amara, there's a program for non-traditional students who want to complete their undergraduate degrees. It's designed for people who had to interrupt their education. And they have partnerships with medical schools for promising students who want to pursue healthcare careers. Amara stared at him, not understanding. I don't have money for tuition, Julian. Even with a part-time program, I can't afford it. That's what scholarships are for, Julian said. And before you argue, these aren't scholarships from me. I didn't donate money to buy your way in. These are legitimate programs that you qualify for. I just helped you find them. The rest is up to you. Your grades, your test scores, your application. All I did was open the door a crack. You have to walk through it yourself. Amara was crying again, overwhelmed. Why would you do this? Because you deserve a second chance at your dreams, Julian said simply. Because you gave up everything for your mother, and that was beautiful, but it doesn't mean you have to give up everything forever. Because you're brilliant and compassionate and you would make an incredible doctor. And because I love you, and I want you to be happy, and I can see in your eyes that this would make you happy. Over the next few months, Amara applied to the program. She studied for placement tests, wrote essays, gathered letters of recommendation. And she got in. Not because of Julian's connections, but because she was genuinely qualified. She started classes in the fall, juggling schoolwork with a new job Julian had helped her find at a medical clinic, doing administrative work that paid better than housekeeping and gave her exposure to the healthcare field. She was exhausted constantly, working and studying and trying to maintain a relationship with Julian in whatever stolen moments they could find. But she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy for the first time since before her mother got sick. Julian was happy too. He had cut back on work, delegating more to his executives, actually taking weekends off. He spent his free time with Amara, helping her study, listening to her talk about her classes with an enthusiasm that was infectious. They were still keeping their relationship secret, but it was getting harder. They wanted to be public. They wanted to stop hiding. But they both knew the moment they went public, everything would change. The scrutiny would be intense. The judgment would be harsh. They needed to be ready for that. They needed to be strong enough to weather it together. Then Julian's son Marcus showed up unannounced one Saturday afternoon in November. Julian was in his study, on a video call with Amara, helping her review for an anatomy exam. He heard the front door open, heard Patricia's startled voice, and then Marcus was standing in the doorway of his study. "Dad, we need to talk," Marcus said, then stopped short when he saw Julian's laptop screen. Amara was visible on the video call, surrounded by textbooks, clearly in the middle of studying. "I'll call you back," Julian said quickly to Amara. "No, don't," Marcus said, his voice cold. "I think I'm finally understanding what's been going on around here." Julian closed the laptop, feeling his heart sink. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I came to drop off some documents you needed to sign," Marcus said. "But apparently I've interrupted something." "Who was that?" "A friend," Julian said carefully. "A friend?" Marcus repeated. "Dad, I'm not an idiot. I've heard the rumors. The staff talks. Word gets around. Is that the housekeeper everyone says you've been inappropriately involved with?" "Her name is Amara, and yes, we're in a relationship," Julian said, forcing himself to stay calm. "But there's nothing inappropriate about it. She doesn't work for me anymore. She hasn't for months. We're two adults who care about each other." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound. "Are you serious right now?" "Dad, she's a maid. Or she was. What is she now, a secretary? And you're, what, playing Pygmalion? Trying to transform her into someone suitable?" "You don't know what you're talking about," Julian said, his voice hardening. "Amara is in medical school. She's one of the smartest, most capable people I've ever met. And I love her." "You love her," Marcus repeated flatly. "Dad, you don't love her. You're lonely and she's young and pretty and she paid attention to you. This is a midlife crisis, not a relationship. And when you finally come to your senses, you're going to humiliate yourself and her and this entire family." "Get out," Julian said quietly. "What?" "I said get out of my house," Julian said, standing. "You don't get to come into my home and insult someone I care about. You don't know Amara. You don't know anything about our relationship. And you certainly don't get to tell me how to live my life. I'm trying to protect you." Marcus shouted. "From what?" "From being happy. Because that's what Amara does. She makes me happy. More happy than I've been in decades. More happy than I was in any of my marriages. More happy than closing deals or making money or impressing people like you ever made me." Marcus stared at his father, genuinely shocked. He had never heard Julian talk like this, so emotional, so unguarded. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "Maybe," Julian said. "But it's my mistake to make. I've spent my whole life doing what other people expected of me. Being the son my father wanted. Being the businessman everyone admired. Being the father you and your siblings needed, or trying to be, even though I failed at that pretty spectacularly. For once in my life, I'm doing something just because it makes me happy. And if you can't be happy for me, if you can't at least try to be supportive, then maybe we don't have much of a relationship anyway." Marcus left without another word, and Julian stood in his study, shaking with adrenaline and anger and something like relief. The secret was out, at least partially. And now they had to deal with the consequences. He called Amara back. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said. "It's okay," Amara said, though she looked shaken. "He's your son. He's worried about you. I understand. He was disrespectful to you, and that's not okay," Julian said. "Are you having second thoughts? About us?" "No," Amara said firmly. "Are you?" "Never," Julian said. "But I think it's time we stopped hiding. I don't want to sneak around anymore. I don't want to pretend you're not the most important person in my life. I want the world to know." "Then let's tell them," Amara said. "Let's do this right. Together." And that's what they did. Over the next few weeks, Julian slowly started being more public about their relationship. He brought Amara to a small dinner party with close friends. Introduced her not as his girlfriend right away, but as Amara, someone important to him, and let people draw their own conclusions. He took her to a gallery opening, where they were photographed together by a society page photographer. He posted a photo of them on his rarely used social media account, a simple picture of them walking in Central Park with a caption that just said, "Happy." The response was immediate and mixed. His business associates were politely curious. His children were mostly silent, except for a curt text from Marcus saying, "This is a mistake." His ex-wives, surprisingly, were supportive or at least neutral. Victoria, his third wife, even called him. "I'm happy for you, Julian," she said. "Truly. You sound different. Lighter. Hold on to that." But the media was less kind. Within days, articles started appearing in gossip columns and online tabloids. Billionaire Julian Harrington dating former housekeeper. From Maid to Millionaire. Inside Julian Harrington's controversial new romance. May December romance or midlife crisis? Harrington's latest relationship raises eyebrows. The articles were cruel, speculating about Amara's motives, questioning Julian's judgment, treating their relationship like a scandal rather than a love story. They dug into Amara's past, found old classmates to interview, published photos of her small apartment in Queens with captions about the stark contrast to Julian's lifestyle. They called her a gold digger, an opportunist, a social climber. They suggested she had deliberately targeted Julian, that she had manipulated a vulnerable, lonely man for financial gain. Amara read the articles late at night on her phone, each one feeling like a punch to the gut. She had known this would happen, had tried to prepare herself for it, but the reality was so much worse than she had imagined. Strangers were dissecting her life, her choices, her character, and finding her wanting. People who had never met her were convinced they knew exactly what kind of person she was. Gold digger. Opportunist. User. The words echoed in her head, making her doubt everything. One particularly vicious article quoted an anonymous source close to the Harrington family, saying that Amara had deliberately stayed late the night Julian collapsed, that she had engineered the entire situation to make herself indispensable to him. The accusation was so absurd, so divorced from reality, that Amara almost laughed. Except it wasn't funny. It was devastating. Julian was furious when he saw the articles. He wanted to sue, to demand retractions, to use every resource at his disposal to destroy the publications that were attacking Amara. But Amara stopped him. "That will just make it worse," she said. "It will feed the narrative that I'm some damsel in distress who needs her wealthy boyfriend to save her. We have to ride this out. Eventually, they'll get bored and move on to the next scandal." "I hate this," Julian said. "I hate that they're hurting you. I hate that people who don't know you get to judge you." "I hate it too," Amara admitted. "But I knew it would happen. We both did." What neither of them had anticipated was how the scrutiny would affect their daily lives. Amara started getting recognized in public. Strangers would stare at her on the subway, whisper to their companions. Once, a woman actually approached her in a coffee shop and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You should be ashamed of yourself, taking advantage of that poor man." Amara had left without her coffee, shaking so badly she could barely walk. At school, her classmates treated her differently. Some were curious, asking intrusive questions about Julian and his wealth. Others were judgmental, making snide comments about how some people will do anything to avoid student loans. Her professors, thankfully, remained professional, but Amara could see the speculation in their eyes. She tried to focus on her studies, to remember why she was doing this, but it was hard when every day felt like running a gauntlet of judgment. Julian's business relationships became strained as well. Some of his longtime associates distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the controversy. Others made crude jokes, treating Amara like a trophy or a conquest rather than a person Julian loved. At a board meeting, one of the executives made a comment about Julian robbing the cradle, and several others laughed. Julian had stood up, announced that the meeting was over, and told the executive to clean out his desk by the end of the day. The power play had been satisfying in the moment, but it created ripples. Word spread that Julian Harrington was no longer the cool, rational businessman they had known. He was emotional, unpredictable, compromised. Some investors started quietly pulling out of deals. The company's stock price dipped slightly, nothing catastrophic, but enough to notice. Julian's children were the hardest part. Marcus refused to speak to him at all. Sophia posted cryptic messages on social media about family disappointment that her followers immediately connected to Julian's relationship. Benjamin, the youngest, was the only one who reached out. He called Julian one evening and asked, simply, "Are you happy, Dad?" "Yes," Julian said. "Genuinely happy. More than I've been in years." There was a long pause. "Then I'm happy for you," Benjamin said. "I don't really understand it, and I think you could have handled the whole thing better, but if she makes you happy, that's what matters. Can I meet her?" Julian had cried after that call, overwhelmed with gratitude for his youngest son's maturity and kindness. The meeting between Benjamin and Amara happened a week later, over lunch at a quiet restaurant. Benjamin was 19, tall and lanky, with his father's eyes and his mother's easy smile. He was polite to Amara, asking her about medical school, her interests, her background. Nothing invasive, just genuine curiosity. Toward the end of the meal, he said, "Look, I'm not going to pretend this isn't weird. You're closer to my age than my dad's. And yeah, some of my friends think it's gross. But I've never seen my dad smile like he does when he talks about you. And I've definitely never heard him talk about being happy before. So if you make him happy, and if this is real, then I'm okay with it." "It's real," Amara said quietly. "I love your father. Not his money, not his status. Him. The person he is when no one else is around. The person who makes terrible jokes and stresses about things he can't control and cries during documentaries about animals." Benjamin laughed. "He cries during animal documentaries?" "Like a baby," Amara said, smiling. "Don't tell him I told you." "Your secret's safe," Benjamin said. He looked at his father, then back at Amara. "Take care of him, okay? He's not as tough as he pretends to be." "I know," Amara said. "And he takes care of me too. That's what makes this work." After Benjamin left, Julian reached across the table and took Amara's hand. "Thank you," he said. "For being patient with him. For understanding how hard this is for my kids." "Of course," Amara said. "They're your children. They'll always be a part of your life, which means they're part of mine too. We'll figure it out." But not everyone was willing to figure it out. 3 months into their public relationship, the pressure reached a breaking point. Amara came home to her apartment one evening to find her door covered in spray paint, "Gold Digger," in large red letters. Her hands shook as she called the police, then called Julian. He was there within 30 minutes, his face pale with rage and fear. The police took a report but said there wasn't much they could do without witnesses or security footage. "That's it," Julian said after the police left. "You're not staying here anymore. It's not safe." "Julian, I'm not going to let some coward with a spray can chase me out of my home," Amara said, though she was badly shaken. "Then let me hire security for you. Someone to watch your building, to make sure you're safe." "That's insane," Amara protested. "I'm a graduate student living in Queens. I don't need bodyguards." "You do if people are vandalizing your home," Julian said. "Please, Amara. Let me do this. I can't lose you." "I won't lose you." Amara agreed, reluctantly. A security guard was posted discreetly outside her building. The landlord repainted her door. Life continued, but the joy had been leached out of it. Every morning, Amara woke up and had to consciously decide to keep going, to not let the hatred and judgment break her. Some days, that decision was easy. Julian would surprise her with flowers, or they would spend a quiet evening watching movies, or she would ace an exam and remember why she was fighting so hard. Other days, it was nearly impossible. She would see another cruel article, or overhear classmates gossiping about her, or catch a stranger staring at her with open hostility, and she would think about how much easier her life would be if she just walked away. She never told Julian about those thoughts. He had enough to worry about. His relationship with Marcus had completely deteriorated. Sophia was only slightly better, sending occasional texts that were civil but cold. His business was stable but no longer thriving the way it had been. And he carried guilt about all of it, guilt that Amara was suffering because of him, guilt that his children were angry, guilt that his choices were having consequences for people he loved. One night in February, almost a year after they had first confessed their feelings in that kitchen, Julian and Amara had a fight. A real fight, not just a disagreement but a full-blown argument born of months of accumulated stress and pressure. It started over something small. Julian had bought Amara a laptop for school without asking her first, a top-of-the-line model that cost more than her monthly rent. Amara had been furious. "You can't just buy me things without asking," she said. "It makes me feel like I'm being kept, like I'm some kind of doll you're dressing up." "I was trying to help," Julian said, defensive. "Your old laptop was dying. You said so yourself. I wanted to make your life easier. By throwing money at it." Amara shot back. "Julian, I know you mean well, but I need to maintain some independence. I need to feel like I'm pulling my own weight in this relationship." "You do pull your weight," Julian said. "You're in school full-time and working part-time. You're exhausted. Why won't you let me help?" "Because everyone already thinks I'm with you for your money," Amara shouted. "Because every time you buy me something or pay for something, it confirms what they're all saying about me. That I'm a gold digger who trapped you." "Who cares what they think?" Julian said. "I don't," Amara said. "But I care what I think. I care about being able to look at myself in the mirror and know that I'm with you because I love you, not because you made my life comfortable. And every expensive gift, every time you solve my problems with your wallet, it makes it harder for me to believe that." Julian stared at her, stung. "So what am I supposed to do? Pretend I don't have money? Pretend I can't help you when you're struggling?" "I want you to ask me before you help," Amara said, her voice breaking. "I want you to treat me like an equal partner, not a charity case. I want to feel like I bring something to this relationship besides my gratitude for everything you do for me." "Is that really how you feel?" Julian asked quietly. "Like you don't bring anything?" "Sometimes," Amara admitted. "Sometimes I look at your life, at everything you've accomplished, and I wonder what you could possibly need me for. You could have anyone. Someone educated, someone sophisticated, someone from your world who knows how to navigate it. Why are you with someone who doesn't even know which fork to use at fancy dinners?" Julian crossed the room and pulled Amara into his arms, even though she resisted at first. "Do you want to know why I'm with you?" he said into her hair. Because you're real. Because you don't want anything from me except me. Because you challenge me and support me and make me laugh. Because you see through all the bullshit to who I actually am. Because I was dying inside before I met you, and you brought me back to life. That's why. Not because you need me. Because I need you. Amara clung to him, crying into his shoulder. I'm sorry, she said. I'm just so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being judged. Tired of feeling like I have to prove myself worthy of you every single day. You don't have to prove anything, Julian said. Not to me. Not to anyone. Amara, if this is too hard, if you want to walk away, I'll understand. I don't want you to stay if it's making you miserable. I don't want to walk away, Amara said. I just want it to get easier. It will, Julian promised, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. It has to. Eventually, people will move on. They'll find some other scandal to obsess over. And we'll still be here, still together, still happy. We just have to hold on. They held on. Through the rest of winter and into spring. Through more articles and more judgment and more awkward encounters with people who thought they had a right to comment on their relationship. Through visits with Benjamin, who was slowly but surely becoming a friend to Amara. Through continued silence from Marcus and Sophia. Through the daily grind of work and school and trying to maintain a relationship under impossible circumstances. And slowly, incrementally, things did start to get easier. The articles became less frequent. People got used to seeing them together. The initial shock and scandal faded into background noise. Amara's classmates stopped whispering when she walked by. Julian's business recovered from the initial turbulence. They learned to navigate their relationship better, to communicate about money and power and expectations in ways that honored both of their needs. In late May, Amara finished her first year of the undergraduate program with a 4.0 GPA. Julian threw her a small celebration dinner, just the two of them and Benjamin, who had become a regular presence in their lives. I'm proud of you, Julian said, raising his glass. This is just the beginning. You're going to be an incredible doctor. I couldn't have done it without you, Amara said. Yes, you could have, Julian said firmly. You're the one who did the work, who studied until 3 a.m, who never gave up even when things got hard. I just believed in you. That's easy. You're the one who did the impossible. That night, after Benjamin left and they were alone in Julian's study, the room where so much of their story had unfolded, Julian got down on one knee. Amara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I know this is fast, Julian said. I know we've only been together a year, and I know that year has been harder than it should have been. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to support your dreams and watch you become the doctor you were always meant to be. I want to grow old with someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves me anyway. I don't have a ring yet because I wanted to ask you first, wanted to let you help choose it, wanted this to be a decision we made together. But Amara Cole, will you marry me? Amara was crying, overwhelmed with joy and terror and love. Yes, she said. Yes, of course yes. Julian stood and kissed her, and for a moment, everything else fell away. The judgment, the articles, the difficulty of their situation, none of it mattered. They had each other. And that was enough. The engagement should have been the happy ending. In fairy tales, that's where the story stops, with the couple deciding to commit to each other forever. But real life doesn't work that way. Real life is messier, more complicated, full of consequences that fairy tales never address. The moment Julian and Amara's engagement became public, the media frenzy started all over again, even more intense than before. Billionaire to marry former maid was the headline in nearly every publication. Think pieces proliferated across the internet, debating everything from the ethics of their age gap to the economics of class mobility through marriage. Feminist writers argued about whether Amara was empowered or exploited. Economic commentators used their relationship as a jumping-off point to discuss wealth inequality. Relationship experts weighed in on whether marriages that began in employer-employee relationships could ever be truly equal. Most of the coverage was not kind. Even articles that tried to be neutral couldn't help but frame their relationship as unusual, noteworthy, worthy of scrutiny in a way that other couples' relationships weren't. Every detail of their lives was examined. Where would they live? Would Amara sign a prenup? What would happen to Julian's business when he died? Would Amara continue school or become a full-time wife? The questions were invasive and relentless, treating their personal decisions like matters of public concern. Julian tried to shield Amara from the worst of it, but it was impossible. She saw the headlines. She heard the whispers. She felt the weight of public opinion pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. The hardest part was Julian's children. Benjamin was happy for them, genuinely supportive, even offering to help plan the wedding. But Marcus and Sophia were another story entirely. Marcus released a statement through his lawyer expressing his deep concern about his father's decision and suggesting that Julian might not be of sound mind given his recent health issues. The implication was clear: Marcus thought Amara was taking advantage of his father's vulnerability, and he was willing to say so publicly. Sophia was only slightly more subtle, posting on social media about how some people will do anything for money, with a thinly veiled reference to her father's engagement. Julian was devastated by his children's reactions, more than he wanted to admit. He had known they wouldn't be thrilled, but he had hoped that over time, they would come to accept his relationship with Amara, maybe even embrace it. Instead, they were actively working against it, trying to poison public opinion, questioning his mental capacity. It hurt in a way that business failures or financial losses never had. These were his children. He loved them, even if he hadn't always been good at showing it. And they were willing to publicly humiliate him rather than accept his choice. "Maybe they're right," Amara said one night, after a particularly brutal article featuring quotes from sources close to the Harrington family. "Right about what?" Julian asked. "Maybe I am taking advantage of you," Amara said quietly. "Maybe you are having some kind of crisis and I'm making it worse. Maybe the age difference is too big and the power dynamic is too unbalanced and we've been fooling ourselves thinking this could work." "Don't do that," Julian said sharply. "Don't let them get in your head. We know what this is. We know how we feel about each other. That's what matters." "Is it?" Amara asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, this is costing you everything. Your relationship with your children. Your reputation. Your peace of mind. And for what? For me. Someone who still has years of medical school ahead of her, who can't contribute financially to this relationship, who comes from a completely different world than you. You're not a cost," Julian said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're not something I'm sacrificing other things for. You're the reason I want to keep living. Before you, I was just going through the motions, counting down the days until I died alone in some hospital room. You gave me a reason to care again. About myself, about the future, about being a better person. How could that possibly be a bad thing?" "But what about Marcus and Sophia?" Amara asked. "They're your children, Julian. Don't you want a relationship with them?" "Of course I do," Julian said. "But not at the cost of my own happiness. Not by pretending I don't love you, by hiding who I am to make them comfortable. They're adults. They need to learn that my life is my own, that I get to make my own choices, even if those choices make them uncomfortable." "What if they never come around?" Amara asked. "What if we get married and they cut you out of their lives completely? Could you live with that?" Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted. "It would hurt. It would hurt like hell. But I also know that if I walked away from you, if I let their disapproval dictate my life, I would regret it for the rest of my days. And I've spent too much of my life already living with regret. They decided to move forward with the wedding, despite everything. A small ceremony, they agreed. Just close friends and family who actually supported them. Benjamin would be there. Patricia, surprisingly, had warmed to Amara over the past year and would attend. A few of Julian's business associates who had remained loyal. Some of Amara's classmates from medical school. Gloria, the longtime housekeeper who had warned Amara about getting involved with Julian but who had also become something of a friend. They set a date for late October, giving them 5 months to plan. Amara insisted on keeping it simple, rejecting Julian's suggestions of elaborate venues and expensive celebrations. They would marry at the estate, in the gardens where they had spent so many evenings walking and talking. They would have a small dinner afterward, nothing fancy, just good food and good company. No press. No spectacle. Just them, committing to each other surrounded by people who actually cared. As the wedding approached, Amara threw herself into school and wedding planning, trying to outrun her anxiety. She was in her second year of the undergraduate program now, already taking advanced science courses and volunteering at a free clinic in the Bronx. She loved the work, loved feeling like she was finally becoming the person she was meant to be. But the stress was enormous. School, work, wedding planning, media attention, the constant judgment. Some days she felt like she was barely holding it together. One evening in late September, about a month before the wedding, Amara stayed late at the clinic. There had been a rush of patients, a flu outbreak combined with several emergency cases, and they needed all the help they could get. By the time Amara left, it was after 10 at night. She was exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline, barely able to think straight. She had texted Julian earlier that she would be late and to not wait up for her. She took the subway back to Queens, too tired to even read the book she had brought. The car was mostly empty, just a few other tired-looking people heading home from late shifts. Amara closed her eyes, leaning her head against the window, and let the rocking of the train lull her into a half-doze. She almost missed her stop, jerking awake at the last second and rushing out before the doors closed. The platform was nearly deserted. Amara walked quickly toward the stairs, her hand in her bag searching for her keys, when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast footsteps, getting closer. Before she could turn around, someone grabbed her bag and yanked hard. Amara held on instinctively, shouting, "Stop!" The thief was stronger than her, pulling her off balance. She stumbled, fell hard on the concrete platform, her hands scraping painfully against the ground. The thief got her bag and ran, disappearing up the stairs before Amara could even process what had happened. For a moment, she just lay there, stunned and hurt. Her hands were bleeding. Her hip throbbed where she had hit the ground. Her bag was gone, with her wallet, her phone, her keys, her school ID, everything. And then the tears came, not because of the physical pain or even the stolen belongings, but because this felt like the last straw. Like the universe was telling her that she didn't deserve good things, that she was foolish to think she could have a happy ending. A transit officer found her a few minutes later, helped her to her feet, called an ambulance even though Amara insisted she was fine. They treated her scrapes at the hospital, nothing serious, and a police officer took a report for the stolen items. Through it all, Amara felt numb, disconnected from her own body. She couldn't call Julian because her phone was gone. Couldn't get into her apartment because her keys were gone. Couldn't even pay for a cab because her wallet was gone. She stood on the street outside the hospital at midnight, wearing clothes that were dirty and torn from her fall, her hands bandaged, wondering how her life had become this. A cab pulled up to the emergency room entrance, and Benjamin Harrington got out. He saw Amara and his face transformed with relief and concern. "Thank God," he said, rushing over. "Are you okay? What happened? How did you know I was here?" Amara asked, confused. "The hospital called my dad's emergency contact number when you couldn't provide a phone number," Benjamin explained. "He was out of town for a meeting, unreachable. So they called me. I came as soon as I got the message." Amara started crying again, overwhelmed by this kindness from someone who had every reason to resent her. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm such a mess. I shouldn't have dragged you out here in the middle of the night." "Are you kidding?" Benjamin said. "Your family. Or you will be in a month. Come on, let's get you home. I'll stay with you until Dad can get back tomorrow." They went back to Julian's estate, because Amara's apartment wasn't safe without new locks and because Benjamin insisted she shouldn't be alone. Patricia made tea and fussed over her in her stern way while Benjamin called his father and explained what had happened. Within minutes, Julian was on the phone with Amara, his voice tight with worry. "I'm flying back right now," he said. "I can be there in 4 hours." "I'm okay," Amara said. "Really? Just shaken up. You don't need to leave your meeting." "The hell I don't," Julian said. "You were hurt. Someone attacked you. I'm coming home." 4 hours later, Julian walked through the door of the estate and went straight to Amara, pulling her into his arms and holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm so sorry," he said into her hair. "I should have been there. I should have had security with you." "Julian, it was just bad luck," Amara said. "It could have happened to anyone." "But it happened to you," Julian said. "Because you were taking the subway at 10 at night, because you were working late, because you're trying to do everything on your own, because you don't want people to say you're dependent on me. This is my fault." "Stop," Amara said firmly. "This is not your fault. This is the fault of whoever stole my bag. Don't take responsibility for things you can't control." But Julian couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, he became obsessed with keeping Amara safe. He hired a car service to drive her to and from school and work. He upgraded security at the estate. He wanted to hire a personal bodyguard for her, but Amara absolutely refused. "I'm not living my life surrounded by security," she said. "I'm not going to become some paranoid rich person who's afraid of the world. That's not who I am and it's not who I want to be." "Then what do you want?" Julian asked, frustrated. "I want to feel normal," Amara said. "I want to go to school and work and plan my wedding without feeling like I'm under siege. I want to be with you without it being this constant battle against the rest of the world. I want simple and easy and uncomplicated, and that's never going to happen, is it? Because we're too different. Because there's too much baggage and too much judgment and too much everything." "Are you saying you want to call off the wedding?" Julian asked quietly. The question hung between them like a sword. Amara closed her eyes. Was she? Part of her wanted to say yes. Wanted to run away from all of this, to go back to her small, quiet life where no one cared what she did or who she loved. But a larger part, the part that had fallen in love with this complicated, damaged, wonderful man, couldn't imagine a life without him anymore. "No," she said finally. "I don't want to call it off. But I'm scared, Julian. I'm scared that we're making a mistake. I'm scared that the world is going to grind us down until there's nothing left of us. I'm scared that 5 years from now we'll look at each other and wonder what we were thinking." "I'm scared too," Julian admitted. "Every day, I'm terrified that you're going to wake up and realize you could have a much easier life with someone else. Someone your own age, someone who doesn't come with 3 angry children and decades of baggage and a public profile that makes you a target. But I'm more scared of losing you. I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering, what if? So I'm willing to be scared and do it anyway. The question is, are you?" Amara thought about everything they had been through. The judgment, the media circus, the family drama, the constant scrutiny. But she also thought about the good parts. The conversations that lasted until dawn. The way Julian made her laugh. The way he supported her dreams without trying to control them. The way he saw her, really saw her, in all her complexity and loved her anyway. The way she felt when she was with him, like she was finally, fully herself. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing to be scared. Let's do this." The month leading up to the wedding was chaotic in the way these things always are. Last-minute decisions about flowers and food and seating arrangements. Fittings for Amara's dress, a simple ivory gown that made her feel beautiful without being ostentatious. Amara's friends from school throwing her a surprise bridal shower that made her cry because it was so normal, so wonderfully, blessedly normal. Benjamin helping with logistics, becoming the unexpected MVP of the wedding planning process. And through it all, the constant undercurrent of Marcus and Sophia's disapproval, their absence from all wedding activities like a wound that wouldn't heal. 3 days before the wedding, Marcus called his father. Julian almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello, Marcus," he said carefully. "Dad," Marcus said, and his voice was different than Julian had heard it in months. Softer. Uncertain. "I'm calling to apologize." Julian almost dropped the phone. "What?" "I was wrong," Marcus said. "About Amara. About your relationship. About all of it. I've been thinking a lot these past few months, talking to my therapist, and I realized something. I wasn't protecting you. I was punishing you for all the times you weren't there when I was growing up. For choosing work over me. And when you chose Amara, when you finally chose something personal over your business, I couldn't handle it. Because why did she get that version of you when I never did?" Julian felt tears streaming down his face. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. You're right. I was a terrible father. I was absent and distant and I prioritized all the wrong things. I can't change the past, but I want to do better. I want to try." "I know you do," Marcus said. "And I can see that you're different with her. Happier. More present. And I realize that's not something to resent. That's something to be grateful for. Because you deserve to be happy, Dad. Even if it took me too long to see that." "Does this mean you'll come to the wedding?" Julian asked hopefully. "If you'll still have me," Marcus said. "I know I've been awful. I understand if you don't want me there." "Of course I want you there," Julian said. "You're my son. I've always wanted you there." Sophia called later that same day with a similar message. Her apology was less eloquent than Marcus's, more tearful and rambling, but the sentiment was the same. She had been angry and resentful and had taken it out on Amara when Amara didn't deserve it. She wanted to make amends. She wanted to be part of her father's life, even if that meant accepting choices she didn't fully understand. "I don't know Amara," Sophia admitted. "But I'd like to. Will you let me try?" "Yes," Julian said simply. "We'd both like that." When Julian told Amara that his children were coming to the wedding, she broke down sobbing. Not sad tears this time, but relieved, happy tears. "It's all going to be okay," she said, clinging to Julian. "We're going to be okay. We were always going to be okay," Julian said. "But this makes it better. This makes it real." October 27th dawned clear and crisp, the kind of perfect fall day that feels like a gift. The estate's gardens were transformed into something magical, white chairs arranged in neat rows, flowers everywhere in shades of cream and gold and burgundy, string lights woven through the trees that would twinkle as evening fell. It was small, as weddings go. Maybe 60 people. But everyone there was someone who genuinely cared about Julian and Amara, who supported their relationship, who wanted to see them happy. And that made it perfect. Amara got ready in one of the guest bedrooms with the help of Patricia, who had surprisingly become her strongest ally among the household staff. Gloria was there too, helping with Amara's hair, telling stories about her own wedding 40 years ago to lighten the mood. "You're sure about this?" Patricia asked as she helped Amara into her dress. It wasn't a challenge, just a genuine question from someone who cared. "I'm terrified," Amara admitted. "But yes, I'm sure. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me." "Good," Patricia said briskly. "Because he'd be lost without you. I've worked for Mr. Harrington for 12 years, and I've never seen him like this. Happy. Really, truly happy. You did that. Downstairs, Julian was getting ready with Benjamin, who was serving as best man. Nervous? Benjamin asked. Out of my mind, Julian admitted, fumbling with his tie for the third time. Benjamin gently pushed his hands away and tied it himself. She's great, Dad. You're lucky. I know, Julian said. Sometimes I still can't believe she said yes. Well, she did, Benjamin said. So now you just have to not screw it up. Julian laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. I'll do my best. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, golden hour, when the light would be perfect. Guests started arriving around 3:30. Julian's business associates, looking slightly uncomfortable in this intimate setting but genuinely happy for him. Amara's classmates from medical school, dressed in their best clothes and clearly excited to see their friend get married. Amara's old professors, the ones who had helped her get back into school, who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. And then, just as Julian was starting to worry they wouldn't show, Marcus and Sophia arrived. Marcus approached his father stiffly, awkwardly, like he wasn't sure if a hug would be welcome. Julian didn't give him a choice, pulling him into a tight embrace. Thank you for coming, Julian said. I wouldn't miss it, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm really sorry, Dad. For everything. Sophia was next, throwing her arms around Julian and crying into his shoulder. I love you, Daddy, she said, using a name she hadn't called him since she was a little girl. I'm sorry I've been so horrible. You're here now, Julian said. That's what matters. At 4 o'clock exactly, the music started. A string quartet playing something classical and beautiful that Amara had chosen. The guests stood and turned toward the house. And then Amara appeared. She had no father to walk her down the aisle, no family left except the one she was about to create. So she walked alone, her head held high, her dress simple but elegant, carrying a bouquet of white roses. She looked terrified and radiant and absolutely beautiful. Julian felt his breath catch in his throat. After everything they had been through, all the obstacles and judgment and pain, she was here. She was choosing him. She was choosing this life together despite how hard it had been. Amara's eyes found his as she walked down the aisle, and everything else fell away. The guests, the gardens, the nervousness. It was just the two of them, looking at each other across a distance that had once seemed unbridgeable but now felt like nothing at all. When she reached him, Julian took her hands, and they were both shaking. The officiant, a friend of Julian's from college who had become a Unitarian minister, began the ceremony. He spoke about love, about choice, about the courage it takes to build a life with another person. He spoke about how Julian and Amara's relationship had challenged people's assumptions about class and age and power dynamics, and how in doing so, they had shown everyone what really mattered, genuine connection, mutual respect, and the willingness to see another person fully and love them anyway. Then came the vows. They had written their own, keeping them private from each other until this moment. Julian went first, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. Amara, before I met you, I was alive but not living. I had everything the world told me I should want, but I felt empty inside. You changed that. You saw through all the walls I had built, all the armor I wore, and you saw me. The real me. The scared, lonely, broken me. And you loved that person anyway. You made me want to be better. Not for success or money or power, but just to be worthy of you. You gave me hope when I had forgotten what hope felt like. You gave me joy when I thought joy was something other people experienced. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning beyond obligations and expectations. You gave me life. Real life. And I promise you, for as long as I'm breathing, I will spend every day trying to give you the same thing. I will support your dreams. I will celebrate your victories. I will hold you through your losses. I will see you, really see you, every single day. I will love you not despite our differences but because of them, because you make my world bigger and brighter and more interesting than it ever was before. I will be your partner, your friend, your biggest fan, and your safe place to land. This is my promise to you, Amara. Today and every day after. Amara was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. She took a shaky breath and began her vows. Julian, when I found you that night, scared and vulnerable and human in a way the world rarely gets to see, I didn't know I was finding my future. I thought I was just doing the right thing, the thing anyone would do. But you saw it differently. You saw me differently. You saw potential in me when I had stopped seeing it in myself. You believed I could still become the person I had dreamed of being, even though I had given up on that dream years ago. You didn't try to save me or fix me or make me into something I wasn't. You just stood beside me and said, I believe in you. Now believe in yourself. And slowly, I did. You taught me that it's okay to want things, to reach for dreams, to take up space in the world. You taught me that love doesn't have to be transactional, that someone can care about you just because of who you are, not what you can do for them. You taught me that I deserve good things, even when the world tells me I don't. And more than anything, you taught me what partnership really means. Not one person saving another, but two people choosing to walk through life together, supporting each other, challenging each other, loving each other through the good and the bad. So I promise you this, Julian. I will never take your love for granted. I will never stop seeing you, the real you beneath the public persona. I will challenge you when you're wrong and support you when you're right. I will be your soft place to fall and your motivation to keep going. I will love you not because of what you can give me, but because of who you are. Kind, intelligent, funny, vulnerable, strong, and so worthy of love. This is my promise to you. Today and always. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Even Patricia was dabbing at her face with a handkerchief, trying to maintain her composure. The officiant smiled through his own tears. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, now pronounce you married. Julian, you may kiss your bride. And he did. Julian kissed Amara like they were the only two people in the world, pouring every ounce of love and relief and joy into that moment. The guests erupted in applause and cheers. Benjamin was grinning. Marcus and Sophia were crying. And Julian and Amara, finally, officially, were married. The reception was everything they had wanted it to be. Intimate, warm, full of laughter and good food and real conversation. No speeches from people who barely knew them. No elaborate choreographed dances or expensive party favors. Just dinner in the estate's dining room, which had been transformed with candles and flowers and soft music, followed by dancing in the library where they had first really talked, where Julian had first started to fall in love. Marcus approached Amara during dinner, clearly nervous. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. "Of course," Amara said, stepping away from the table with him. They walked to a quiet corner of the room. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said. "A real one, not just the one I gave my dad. I was awful to you. I questioned your motives, I tried to turn people against you, I made your life hell. And you didn't deserve any of it. You were just trying to love my father, and I couldn't see past my own issues to recognize that." "I understand why you were protective," Amara said gently. "He's your father. You love him. You didn't want to see him get hurt." "That's generous," Marcus said. "But it's not really true. I wasn't being protective. I was being selfish. I was angry that he was choosing someone over his work, because he never chose me over his work. And I took that anger out on you. That was wrong. I'm sorry. I accept your apology," Amara said. "And I want you to know, I'm not trying to replace you or your siblings in his life. I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I just want to be part of his life. There's room for all of us." "I'm starting to see that," Marcus said. "And I'd like to get to know you better. The real you, not the version I made up in my head. I'd like that too, Amara said. Sophia's approach was less formal. She simply grabbed Amara in a hug during dessert and whispered, "Thank you for making him happy. I've never seen him like this." Later, when the dancing started, Julian and Amara had their first dance as a married couple. They swayed together to an old jazz standard, holding each other close, ignoring everyone else in the room. "How are you feeling?" Julian asked. "Like I'm in a dream," Amara admitted. "A really good dream that I'm afraid I'll wake up from." "This is real," Julian said. "We're real. We made it." "We did," Amara said, smiling up at him. "Despite everything, we actually did it." The party continued into the night. Benjamin gave a toast that was funny and heartfelt, talking about how strange it had been to watch his father fall in love, but how wonderful it was to see him happy. Patricia gave a surprisingly emotional speech about how Amara had brought life back to the estate, how the house felt like a home again instead of just a beautiful empty space. Gloria talked about working for wealthy families for 40 years and never seeing a love story as genuine as this one. And through it all, Julian and Amara stayed close, touching hands, exchanging glances, existing in their own little bubble of happiness. Around midnight, as the party was winding down and guests were starting to leave, Julian and Amara slipped away. They walked out to the gardens, still decorated with lights and flowers, and sat on a bench overlooking the grounds. "Thank you," Julian said quietly. "For what?" Amara asked. "For saying yes. For staying when things got hard. For believing in us when the whole world was telling you not to. For giving me a second chance at life." "You gave me the same thing," Amara said. "A second chance. A reason to dream again. A future I thought I'd lost." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars, feeling the cool October breeze. "What happens now?" Amara asked eventually. "Now we live," Julian said simply. "We build a life together. We figure out how to be married, how to navigate your medical school schedule and my work obligations and everything else. We make mistakes and fix them. We grow together. We just live." "I like the sound of that," Amara said. "Me too," Julian said. They sat there until the last guests left, until the caterers had cleaned up and gone home, until the house was quiet again. Then they went inside together, husband and wife, ready to start their new life. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, like all first years of marriage are. Julian and Amara had to learn how to share space, how to navigate daily life as a unit rather than as individuals. They had to figure out finances, despite Amara's discomfort with Julian's wealth. They agreed that she would maintain her own bank account, that she would pay her own school expenses with her own earnings from the clinic, that they would have shared accounts for household expenses but separate money for personal things. It wasn't a perfect system, but it helped Amara feel like she maintained some independence. They had to figure out time management. Amara's school schedule was demanding, especially as she moved into upper-level science courses and prepared for the MCAT. Julian's work, while he had scaled it back, still required travel and long hours. They made a rule, at least 3 dinners together per week, no phones, no work talk unless it was urgent. And 1 weekend per month completely unplugged, just the two of them. They had to figure out family dynamics. Marcus and Sophia were slowly, tentatively building relationships with Amara, but it was awkward. They didn't know how to relate to their father's wife who was closer to their age than to his. There were uncomfortable moments, misunderstandings, times when old resentments surfaced. But they kept trying, kept showing up, kept choosing to work through it. The media interest eventually faded, as Amara had predicted it would. After the wedding, there were a few follow-up articles, but they were less vicious, more curious. What was it like to go from cleaning houses to being married to a billionaire? How did Amara balance medical school with being a wealthy man's wife? Was this the new face of American social mobility? Amara gave exactly one interview, to a respectable magazine, and said everything she wanted to say. That she and Julian were just two people who fell in love. That class differences mattered but didn't have to be insurmountable. That she was still the same person she had always been, just in different circumstances. That she hoped their story would inspire other people to look past surface differences and see the humanity in each other. After that, she refused all other interview requests, and eventually, the media moved on to other stories. Amara thrived in school. She finished her undergraduate degree with honors, then immediately started medical school at Columbia, the school she had originally been accepted to a decade earlier. It felt like coming full circle, walking through those gates as a medical student, sitting in lectures about anatomy and physiology, doing rotations at hospitals. She was older than most of her classmates, but that gave her perspective they lacked. She had lived more, experienced loss and hardship, and that made her a better student, a more empathetic future doctor. Julian was endlessly proud of her. He came to every event he was allowed to attend, asked about her studies with genuine interest, helped her practice for exams even though he barely understood the material. He funded scholarships at Columbia for non-traditional students, people who had interrupted their education for family obligations or financial need. He never made a big deal about it, never sought recognition, just quietly tried to make the path easier for other people like Amara. His relationship with his children continued to improve. Marcus started calling regularly, actually asking about Julian's life rather than just updating him on business matters. They had lunch once a month, just the two of them, and slowly rebuilt a relationship that had been damaged by years of distance and resentment. Sophia brought her fiancé to meet Julian and Amara, and they all had dinner together, awkward at first but warming as the evening progressed. Benjamin became a regular fixture at the estate, coming home from college on breaks and actually wanting to spend time with his father rather than just checking in out of obligation. The change in Julian was remarkable. He smiled more. Laughed easily. Seemed younger, lighter. His executives noticed the difference. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," his COO told him. "You're happier, and when you're happier, you make better decisions. The company's thriving." Julian credited Amara with all of it, but she always insisted they had changed each other. "You gave me my dreams back," she would say. "I gave you your life back. We're even." 3 years into their marriage, Amara finished medical school and matched with a residency program in family medicine at a hospital in Brooklyn. It was prestigious, competitive, and exactly what she wanted. Julian threw her a celebration dinner, inviting everyone who had supported her journey. "I want to say something," Amara said, standing up at the end of the meal. The room quieted. "When I was 22, I thought my life was over before it really began. I thought I had lost my chance, that I would spend the rest of my life cleaning other people's homes and dreaming about what might have been. And for a while, that's exactly what I did. I survived, but I didn't really live. Then I met someone who saw me differently than I saw myself. Who believed in me when I had stopped believing. Who loved me not in spite of my circumstances but as a whole person, dreams and all. Julian, you changed my life. But more than that, you reminded me that I had the power to change my own life. That it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. So thank you. For everything." Julian was crying, not even trying to hide it. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "Of the doctor you're becoming, of the person you've always been. You did this. You worked your ass off for years while dealing with media scrutiny and family drama and everything else. This is your achievement. I just got to watch." The room erupted in applause. Patricia was crying. Benjamin was grinning. Marcus and Sophia were clapping enthusiastically. And Amara felt a sense of accomplishment that went deeper than any grade or test score. She had done it. She had reclaimed her dream. Not despite the obstacles, but through them. All of them. Residency was brutal. 100-hour weeks, overnight shifts, constant exhaustion, impossible decisions about patient care with limited resources. Amara came home many nights barely able to stand, collapsing into bed still in her scrubs. Julian learned to be supportive in quiet ways. He made sure there was always food in the house. He ran her baths and didn't talk unless she wanted to talk. He held her when she cried after losing a patient. He celebrated with her when she made a breakthrough in someone's treatment. He adapted his life to her schedule, rather than expecting her to adapt to his. And slowly, Amara became the doctor she had always dreamed of being. Skilled, compassionate, the kind of doctor who listened to patients not just about their symptoms but about their lives. She worked primarily with low-income families, immigrants, people who reminded her of her mother. People who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford healthcare. People who put off treatment because they couldn't miss work. People who felt invisible in a system that didn't always see them as worthy of care. Julian supported her work in every way he could. He made large donations to the hospital, funding programs for uninsured patients. He used his connections to advocate for healthcare policy changes. He joined Amara at community health fairs, not as a billionaire doing charity but as a husband supporting his wife's calling. People who met them together often commented on how well-matched they seemed, despite their different backgrounds. How they balanced each other. How they made each other better. 5 years into their marriage, on their anniversary, Julian surprised Amara with a trip. Not somewhere expensive or exotic, but to her hometown upstate, the place she hadn't been back to since her mother's funeral. "Why are we here?" Amara asked as they drove through familiar streets. "Because I wanted to see where you came from," Julian said. "I wanted to understand the place that shaped you." They visited her mother's grave. Amara hadn't been there in years, too painful, too wrapped up in just surviving to have time for grief. She knelt in front of the simple headstone, Julian standing behind her with a hand on her shoulder. "Hi, Mom," Amara said softly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to visit. I'm sorry I couldn't make it work the first time, the way you wanted. But I did it eventually. I'm a doctor now. Well, almost. Resident. But still. I'm helping people, the way we always talked about. And I met someone. Someone who loves me the way you always said someone would. Someone who sees me. I wish you could have met him. I think you would have liked him. He cries at sad movies and he makes terrible jokes and he believes in me even when I don't believe in myself. Kind of like you did." She was crying now, years of held-back grief finally flowing out. "I miss you, Mom. Every day. But I'm okay. I'm happy. I'm living the life we dreamed about. I just wish you were here to see it." Julian knelt beside her, his own eyes wet. "Hi, Rose," he said to the headstone. "I'm Julian. I'm married to your daughter. I know that probably sounds crazy, and if you were alive, you'd probably have a lot of questions about how this happened. But I want you to know that I love her. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her, trying to honor the sacrifice you made so she could have a chance at her dreams. Thank you for raising someone so extraordinary. Thank you for teaching her about strength and dignity and kindness. Thank you for her." They stayed at the grave for a long time, talking to Rose, sharing stories, crying together. When they finally left, Amara felt lighter somehow. Like she had finally been able to share her happiness with the person who had wanted it most for her. That night, lying in a small bed and breakfast in Amara's hometown, she turned to Julian. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Marrying me? Taking on all the complications that came with it?" "Never," Julian said without hesitation. "Not for a single second." "Do you?" "No," Amara said. "But I wonder sometimes what our life would look like if we had met in different circumstances. If we had been from the same world. We wouldn't be us," Julian said. "Our differences are part of what makes this work. You keep me grounded. I push you to dream bigger." We balance each other. If we had been the same, we wouldn't have had anything to teach each other. I love you, Amara said. I know people think it's strange or that we're some kind of weird social experiment, but I don't care. You're my person. You're my home. You're mine too, Julian said. Always. 7 years into their marriage, Amara finished her residency and accepted a position as an attending physician at a community health center in Brooklyn. It wasn't prestigious. It didn't pay particularly well, especially compared to what she could have made in private practice. But it was exactly what she wanted. Julian, meanwhile, had been gradually transitioning control of his company to his executives, preparing for semi-retirement. At 59, he had decided he had spent enough of his life in boardrooms and on conference calls. He wanted to spend his remaining years actually living, actually being present for the things that mattered. I'm thinking of starting a foundation, he told Amara one evening. A real one, not just a tax shelter. Focused on education access for people who had to interrupt their schooling. Second chance scholarships, basically. Programs to help people like you. I love that idea, Amara said. Can I help? I was hoping you would, Julian said. They spent months planning it, working with lawyers and advisors to set up the structure, determining how to evaluate applications, how to provide not just money but also support and mentorship. They decided to call it the Rose Cole Foundation, after Amara's mother. She would have loved this, Amara said when they finalized the name. She believed everyone deserved a second chance. The foundation launched a year later, funding 50 students in its first year, 100 in its second, 200 in its third. Each scholarship recipient received full tuition, living expenses, and mentorship from professionals in their field of study. The success rate was remarkable. Over 90% of recipients completed their degrees. Many went on to graduate school or started successful careers. And each of them received a letter with their scholarship offer that said, "It's never too late to become who you're meant to be. We believe in you. Now believe in yourself." Julian and Amara were involved with every aspect of the foundation. They read applications, met with recipients, attended graduation ceremonies. It became Julian's new purpose, the thing that filled the space his business had once occupied. And it was infinitely more fulfilling. 10 years into their marriage, on a quiet evening in October, Julian and Amara sat in the same garden where they had been married, watching the sunset. They did this often now, this simple ritual of being together, talking about their days, sharing silence when words weren't needed. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Julian asked. "Which night?" "The night you found me. When I was on the floor of my study." "I said a lot of things," Amara said. "I wasn't really thinking clearly." "You told me to stay," Julian said. "You held my hand and told me to stay with you, that help was coming, that I was going to be okay." "I remember," Amara said softly. "I meant it," Amara said. "In that moment, I couldn't stand the thought of you being alone, of you dying without anyone there who cared. It seemed like the saddest thing in the world." "You saved my life that night," Julian said. "Not just physically, though that too. But you saved me from the life I was living. The empty, lonely, meaningless existence I had convinced myself was fine. You showed me what life could be." "We saved each other," Amara corrected. "You showed me that dreams could be reclaimed. That it wasn't too late to become who I was meant to be. We saved each other, Julian." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, watching the sky change colors. "I'm glad you were invisible," Julian said eventually. Amara laughed. "That's an odd thing to say." "I mean it," Julian said. "If you had been one of my business associates, or someone from my social circle, or someone I met at a party, I wouldn't have really seen you. I would have seen your status, your connections, what you could do for me. But because you were invisible to everyone else, I had to actually look. I had to see you as a person. And what I saw was extraordinary. I'm glad you collapsed, Amara said, then laughed at how terrible that sounded. I don't mean I'm glad you were in pain. I mean I'm glad that life forced us together in that moment. Because I never would have approached you otherwise. I would have cleaned your house and gone home and never known what I was missing. But that night, when you needed help, the walls came down. We were just two people, scared and vulnerable and human. And that's when we really saw each other. Best worst night of my life, Julian said. Mine too, Amara agreed. They stayed in the garden until the stars came out, until the temperature dropped and they needed to go inside. As they walked back to the house, arm in arm, Amara thought about how far they had come. From employer and employee, to friends, to lovers, to partners. From judgment and scrutiny to acceptance and peace. From broken, lonely people to a couple who had built something real and lasting against all odds. Inside the house, warm and welcoming in a way it had never been before Amara, they made tea and sat in the library, surrounded by books. This room where they had first really talked, where Julian had first started to fall in love. Read to me? Julian asked, settling into his favorite chair. What do you want to hear? Amara asked, scanning the shelves. Something you love, Julian said. Something that means something to you. Amara pulled down a worn copy of a biology textbook, one of the ones she had kept from her original time at Columbia, one of the ones she used to look at late at night and dream about who she might have been. But now, instead of making her sad, it made her smile. Because she had become that person after all. Just took a different path to get there. She opened the book and started reading aloud about cellular processes, about how living things were constantly breaking down and rebuilding themselves, about how change was the only constant in life. Julian listened, his eyes closed, a small smile on his face. Not because he particularly cared about cellular biology, but because he loved listening to Amara talk about things she was passionate about. Loved the sound of her voice, the enthusiasm in her tone, the joy she took in learning and growing. This, he thought, was what happiness looked like. Not grand gestures or expensive things or impressive achievements, though those had their place. But this quiet moment, with the woman he loved, in a warm house, surrounded by books, just being together. This was what he had been searching for his entire life without knowing it. I love you, he said, interrupting her reading. I love you too, Amara said, smiling at him. Now let me finish this chapter. It's about mitochondria. The powerhouse of the cell, Julian said dutifully, making Amara laugh. Someone's been paying attention, she said. I always pay attention to you, Julian said. That's how this whole thing started, remember? I paid attention. And my life changed forever. Mine too, Amara said softly. Mine too. So now you've heard the whole story. From the night Julian collapsed to the life they built together. From judgment and scrutiny to acceptance and peace. From two lonely people finding each other to a couple who changed each other's lives. And I want to ask you something. Really think about this. How many people in your life are invisible to you? How many people do you interact with every day without really seeing them? The person who serves your coffee. The person who cleans your office. The person who bags your groceries. Do you know their names? Do you know their stories? Do you see them as full human beings with dreams and struggles and complex inner lives? And on the flip side, have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever felt like you didn't matter, like your dreams were too small or too big, like the world had decided who you were allowed to be and there was no room for negotiation? Because here's what Amara and Julian's story teaches us. It's never too late to become who you're meant to be. Circumstances can delay your dreams, but they can't kill them unless you let them. And real love, the kind that changes lives, happens when we see past all the surface stuff, all the labels and categories and assumptions, and recognize the humanity in each other. It happens when we pay attention. When we stay when others leave. When we believe in someone's potential even when they've stopped believing in it themselves. This story asks you to look at your own life and ask some hard questions. Are you living the life you want, or the life you think you're supposed to live? Are you chasing things that don't actually make you happy because that's what success is supposed to look like? Are you dismissing people or opportunities because they don't fit your preconceived notions of how things should be? Are you letting fear of judgment stop you from pursuing what you really want? Because here's the truth. Life is short. Way too short to spend it being miserable or lonely or trapped in a version of yourself that isn't really you. Too short to let other people's opinions dictate your choices. Too short to miss out on extraordinary things because they come in unexpected packages. Julian could have let his business partner's disapproval, his children's anger, and the media's judgment stop him from being with Amara. He could have decided it was too complicated, too risky, too likely to end badly. And he would have died alone in his big beautiful empty house, never knowing what he was missing. Amara could have walked away 100 times. When things got hard, when strangers spray-painted her door, when classmates gossiped and articles called her names. She could have decided that the cost of love was too high, that being safe and invisible was better than being seen and judged. And she would have lived a small, careful life, always wondering what might have been. But they didn't do that. They chose each other. They chose to be brave. They chose to believe that what they had was worth fighting for, even when the whole world was telling them to stop. And because they made that choice, because they had the courage to be vulnerable and real and authentically themselves, both of their lives became bigger and more beautiful than they ever could have been alone. So let me ask you one more time. What would you have done in their place? Would you have had the courage to love across such a massive divide? Would you have been willing to face the judgment and the scrutiny and the constant questioning? Or would you have played it safe, stuck with what was comfortable and expected, and missed out on something extraordinary? And maybe more importantly, what are you going to do now? Because this isn't just a story about two people who fell in love. It's a story about choice. About seeing and being seen. About second chances and refusing to accept that your life is already written. About paying attention to the people around you and recognizing that everyone has a story, everyone matters, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it challenged something you believed or reminded you of something you'd forgotten, then do something with that feeling. Don't just watch this video and move on. Take action. Look at your own life. See the invisible people. Chase your deferred dreams. Tell someone you love them. Make a choice that scares you. Be brave enough to want what you want instead of what you think you should want. And if you connected with this story, if it resonated with something deep inside you, then please subscribe to this channel. Because I tell stories like this. Stories about real people facing impossible situations and finding their way through. Stories that challenge us to be better, to see more clearly, to live more fully. Comment below and tell me what you thought. Tell me if you've ever felt invisible or if you've ever had to choose between safety and happiness. Tell me where you're watching from and what this story meant to you. Because these stories matter. Your story matters. We all matter, every single one of us, regardless of our job title or bank account or social status. We all deserve to be seen. To be loved. To have a second chance at our dreams. Thank you for staying with me through this whole journey. Thank you for caring about Julian and Amara, for rooting for them, for believing in their love even when the world didn't. That care, that willingness to see the humanity in other people's stories, that's what makes us human. That's what connects us. And that's what's going to carry us forward into whatever comes next. So go. Live your life. Pay attention to people. Be brave. Choose love over fear. And remember, it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And take care of each other.